Welcome to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. And now here's your host, Wade T. Lightheart.
What is Awesome Health? It's actually an acronym that stands for air, water, exercise, sunshine, optimizers, mental beliefs and attitudes, and education. These are the pillars of peak health, and my team and I have created a free 12-week course that you can use to transform. Each day, you'll get a written and video lesson delivered to your inbox. Everything is covered from the foundations of digestion to advanced alternative therapies few people know about. And again, it's 100% free. Just go to bioptimizers.com. That's bioptimizers.com.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today we're going to talk about the use of autologous, that's one owns, and for one's own cells, and machine-based energy to stimulate natural healing. And today's guest is Steven Sampson, who is an internationally recognized pioneer in orthopedic regenerative medicine. He founded the Orthohealing Center, a premier medical clinic in Los Angeles, California, specializing in non-surgical, orthopedic, and cell-based medicine. Dr. Sampson recently created biorecovery labs utilizing machine-based energy, including Shockwave, to stimulate the body's natural healing capacity. Steven, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Wade. Great to be here.
Okay, so I think maybe we can kind of get into the field of regenerative medicine, and it's a growing field, and a field that has all sorts of, well, it's a circus. I mean, there's theories, there's proven aspects, and then there's we're not so sure. And there is a startling amount of, I would say, new technologies being thrown at the marketplace. And a lot of people are faced with the challenge if they're injured or they have sort of things. One, they go to their traditional GP, or they go and they refer you out to a specialist and say, oh, it's your knee. You know, you got a torn ACL or a meniscus damage or whatever it happens to be, whatever the injury is, and says, well, I know this surgeon, and you go to that one, and maybe if you're a little bit more sophisticated, you go search out a couple more and get a couple of different opinions and get on the schedule, get surgery or whatever.
Yep.
You're talking about is, hey, there's another option. There may be that there is some non-surgical applications that may be more beneficial with less side effects or have a different procedure. So there's an emerging field of non-surgical applications. So I'd like to know how you got into, we'll get into all those things for our listeners. I want to know how you got into the field of regenerative medicine, you know, why that's important and where do you think it's going? And then we'll kind of get into these other areas after.
Great. Yeah, I think it's great to share my story, and it echoes other stories and how this field is evolving. So I completed residency training 16 years ago in New York City. And my first job was in Santa Monica, California at a premier orthopedic group. And during training, I was disenchanted with the short-term ill effects of steroids or cortisone. There's an analogy of when you have a hungry child and you give them sugar cereal, it comes back to bite you where they're satiated, things are okay, and they bottom out. And so in training, when I saw the use of cortisone or steroids, we were giving patients this false sense of healing. And they'd go back to their busy, active lifestyles, and the cortisone would mask the body's natural feedback. It's trying to tell us there's an injury, let's heal it. And we were masking the symptoms. And so they were having recurrent injuries, or the steroids would wear off and their pain was worse. And worse yet, sometimes their tissue would tear because steroids can cause tendon or tissue damage. So I felt there must be a better way. And when I came to the West Coast, the ortho group I was working with works with the US men's national soccer team. And I heard about this treatment being done on Spanish soccer players, taking their blood and spinning it down and re-injecting it. And so I'm an osteopathic physician. And so the fundamental philosophy is that the body has the innate ability to self-repair. And our role as physicians is to try to facilitate that natural healing capacity. And so the light bulb went on and I started researching PRP. And it made sense. And we treated a soccer player. He was featured on Good Morning America with PRP, or platelet-rich plasma, which is basically taking your blood, spinning it down, concentrating your platelets and growth factor, and then under ultrasound guidance, finding the injury and re-injecting it to try to send signals on a cell level to the body to heal. So this soccer player got back in half the time from what's called an MCL, a ligament injury. And then I tried surfing, moving to California, and I injured my own MCL. And so the doctor became the patient. And I was really impressed with the natural healing, getting true feedback, and had a great result. And so then I published one of the first research papers talking about using PRP for orthopedic injuries. And there were a couple papers on tennis elbow or using it in surgeries. This was 16 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, 16 years ago. And I would lecture at my local hospital and say, can I get a raise of hands? Who's heard of PRP? And it was crickets. Mm-hmm. And so I began to publish papers and research on PRP. And there was no research about injecting blood or plasma into a joint. Previously, it was unheard of because we know hemophiliacs that have a bleeding disorder, it actually causes damage. So why would we inject blood into a joint? But when you spin the blood and you remove a component called the red blood cells, you're removing the negative factors of healing back into the knee joint. So I published one of the first studies on knee osteoarthritis as a pilot group, bare bones. I drew the blood myself. I injected about 13 patients all in one day. And so then I felt there's really no place that doctors can learn about these treatments. We're all on islands. And so it wasn't being discussed at any medical event or forum. So I created what's called TOBI, the Orthobiologic Institute. So with no experience or training in event production, I hosted the first orthopedic or stem cell conference really globally. And we had about 20 doctors. They came from Singapore, Spain, Saudi Arabia, Philippines, whoever heard about it. And we were all so excited to connect together and share science. And TOBI has grown over the last 15 plus years to 1,000 attendees from 40 countries, 60 exhibitors, kind of a who's who in the field and doing reputable work with stem cell or regenerative medicine that we'll talk about, including platelets and other cell therapies.
It's fascinating. So what have you noticed in this terminology of regenerative medicine? What is regenerative medicine to you? What is it to the general public? And maybe what are its positives, downsides, or limitations and opportunities, I guess?
Yeah, so with the exploding growth of this field comes inherent challenges, and there's some bad actors out there, and patients are vulnerable. They have pain and they want a quick fix, a cure. They want to avoid surgery. They're not sure who to see or who to trust. And so what we've seen is in the past 10 years, there's been some unfortunate experiences for patients. And I serve as an expert witness in medical legal work. And I've seen what happens on the other side for the patient. And so many things have come about, including your messaging to patients and not making any false claims, false promises, which starts from the website of the physician. Many publications have shown that most clinicians are not compliant with FTC or FDA guidelines looking out for the patient's safety. And so if a website claims, PRP will cure your knee arthritis, will regrow your cartilage, those are false claims and can get that doctor into trouble and create false expectations of the patient. So furthermore, the term regenerative injections is really prohibited and not PC, because most of these treatments are aimed at controlling the pain and inflammation and improving function, getting our community back to being active in a safe manner, but not necessarily regrowing someone's cartilage or tissue that may have been injured. So there are some false claims that we have to be mindful of and not creating mixed expectations with the patient. And then the last thing to be concerned about is, in America, bigger is always better. And I have a very high profile clinic, and my patients usually have resources for the best possible care anywhere. And they always want something bigger, kind of sexier, that you can't get in the United States. But the reality is there's very poor evidence science behind it. And in fact, some patients can get hurt from some of these unproven therapies. So the term stem cell is really not PC anymore. The godfather of stem cell that coined the term is a colleague of ours from Case Western, Arnold Kaplan, a PhD. And he coined that term, and they were called mesenchymal stem cells, or MSCs. And what happened was the term stem cell got so abused and misused in the community that it wasn't an appropriate term. And so now they're called medicinal signaling cells, which makes more sense in that when our body has an injury, there's an immediate ambulatory response, like a paramedics, that signals new injury, triggers increased blood flow through nitrous oxide, various mechanisms, and cells mobilize or move to the area of injury to try to help kickstart repair. So when clinics are using the term stem cell, that's typically a no-no and a red flag, and some doctors have gotten into trouble. And then lastly, back to the bigger, better concept, the umbilical cord cell tissue products. So that's a common question I have after I go through my whole spiel of what I'm recommending, taking the patient's own cells or tissues for their orthopedic injuries. Well, what about umbilical cord? And in theory, it sounds great. Taking a newborn who has the incredible cellular capacity to grow organs, tissue, bone, harnessing that and simply injecting it. But the reality is the quality control of those products, from a cesarean section, moving it all the way to a vial, frozen, preserved, and then available to a doctor to inject in the office, is fraught with challenges and concerns. The doctor doesn't know what's in that vial. And recently there was an outbreak of E. coli bacteria. So clinics across the country were injecting these contaminated products into patients that were getting very sick. And so the FDA in May 31st, 2021 stated that using these off-the-shelf birthing tissue products from another human being constitute a drug, and therefore have to go through the necessary regulatory channels and trials and guidelines to be safe and effective for the public. And so these amniotic tissue birthing products, umbilical cord, they've all been taken off the shelf. And some patients had gotten sick from them, or their studies showing they're just dead cells. And so it's important for patients and readers to know that if a doctor's providing these therapies, they may not be compliant with the standard of care and guidelines. And it's not chicken soup can't hurt. You know, some of these injections do have negative consequences. And so it's really important to be informed.
So quick question in that field, because there's another derivative I think that's important to address, and that is exosomes. So where would you qualify exosomes in the regenerative conversation, and that distinction of what they are as opposed to, say, stem cells or these type of things?
Yeah, so exosomes, again, another hot, sexy new product that people are interested in. But the reality is those are what's called allogeneic, which refers to a product from another human being. And then typically these are manufactured in labs that don't have the traditional sophistication of typical pharmaceutical grade products and may have issues. And there have been outbreaks of bacteria and medical legal cases with exosomes as well. So exosomes are small micro DNA particles that carry important information and may well have a lot of therapeutic benefits, but under the FDA regulatory guidelines, they clearly listed exosomes along with birthing tissue products as being prohibited. And then I would preface, you could have this podcast in 12 months and it could be a different conversation. Right. The landscape is constantly changing. There was recently a trial where a clinic that was in Beverly Hills, California, had sued the FDA and challenged their opinion on a matter of adipose, where they took fat and instead of just spinning it down and re-injecting it, they added a medication called collagenase to help amplify and purify the MSC or regenerative cell there. And the FDA considered that as a drug because you're minimally manipulating or maybe changing the characteristics of that cell, which makes it a drug and shouldn't be available. So the clinic in Beverly Hills recently won that trial, and it will likely be appealed. And so, a lot of doctors are, hands up in the air. What can we do? What can't we do? We want to be safe and compliant. But I usually coach physicians and explain the safest route now is to stick with what we know we can do and stay in the safe zone of these autologous natural-based products, which really have a great safety profile, and we're seeing really good results in our clinic.
So when it comes to mesenchymal stem cells, what is if those are used for people, can they come from your own body? But the fat cell, there's some question about the fat cell versus other sources. So what are the potential sources for stem cells, and where are we in the gray area? Where are we in the okay area? Where we're in the unknown area?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this comes up in my clinical questions with patients all the time. So there are different sources of cells, and the procedures are apples to oranges and can't be compared equally because they're just different. So you have PRP, which is taking your blood and platelets and plasma, and has 0 stem cells. Some clinics will falsely call this a stem cell therapy, or patients will just think it's a stem cell therapy, but it really has no stem cell in it. But it has proteins and growth factor that, when injected into the body, create some crosstalk, cell signaling communication to wake up areas that are injured. For example, did you know when an arthritic joint, say a hip or a knee, has severe arthritis, one might think, oh, those areas are devoid of stem cells or these MSCs, but they're actually in abundance, but they're sick, diseased, and dysfunctional. So the theory is potentially by injecting PRP into this dysfunctional cell environment, you're waking it up to try to kickstart its own ability to start reducing inflammation and repair. So that's PRP, which is not a, formerly called stem cell therapy, but is a first generation bedside biologic therapy, usually reserved for early intervention, mild to moderate intervention. So if you had tennis elbow, I was an author on the biggest study on PRP versus placebo. We've shown in major studies very effective. Early mild to moderate knee arthritis, also very strong evidence for PRP. We found there's different processing and formulation of PRP, which varies who you see. So Wade, you could have a friend in San Diego who saw an orthopedic doctor that dabbles in PRP and just kind of used a cheap preparation of PRP, didn't use a ultrasound machine to provide accurate location, didn't comprehensively treat the knee as an organ. So if they had a meniscus tear, they just simply dumped it in the joint, called it a day. They may not have had 45 minutes to an hour to consult that patient, explain what to expect. It's not like a steroid where you get great results right away and then it bottoms out. PRP gets a bit sore and gets better. So there's a lot of variability in terms of how the patient experiences, in terms of the quality of the product, how it's injected, patient expectation, communication, follow-up. So that's PRP. Then the next autologous or natural cell therapy is bone marrow concentrate, also called BMAC or BMC. And that's a treatment traditionally done in the office where the patient receives some local medicine to make them feel relaxed. In our clinic, we use laughing gas, like when you go to the dentist. They lay on their stomach and we numb the back of their pelvis, which is a rich source of these anti-inflammatory reparative cells. And what's interesting is bone marrow has very limited former MSCs or stem cell. 0.01% of marrow is actually a stem cell or a MSC, but it has a very strong anti-inflammatory component to it called IRAP. Like if you remember years ago when Kobe Bryant, rest in peace, went to Germany for a plasma treatment, he was receiving IRAP through a processing of whole blood, but bone marrow is a natural source of IRAP, anti-inflammatory. And so that treatment's done in an office setting where marrow is removed through a small needle in the back of the hip. It gets put in a machine called a centrifuge, which is like a record player, same machine that spins blood and platelets. And what happens with blood, it's pretty cool, is when you spin it down, there are 4 layers, much like oil and water or vinegar. And so there's the red blood cells, which are the heaviest and sit to the bottom. And then you have your white blood cells and your platelets in the middle. And then you have your plasma on the top. And there are different mousetraps or machines that can filtrate different percentages of these 4 cell groups that make up our soup when we inject. And so bone marrow is reserved for more moderate to severe cases. In my practice, I'm using it for more advanced arthritis when PRP I feel like isn't going to be as effective. And so that's bone marrow concentrate. And then lastly, there's adipose or fat, which is another rich source of reparative cells and can act as a cushion. And so there are various devices available where doctors can harvest fat off the abdomen. It's not a liposuction, it's really a fat harvest. So patients will hope that it's a noticeable weight loss. Most patients are more enthusiastic about taking fat than marrow, although I found both treatments very equal. And my colleague at Emory had compared the two for knee arthritis and found equal benefits. So sometimes based on the patient's body habitus and age, we may decide one or the other. Studies show that fat is rich in these MSCs and does not decline with age or time. Although patients that are morbidly obese, interestingly, their fat and their cells are not as viable or lively when analyzing them. And so depending on the patient's age, if the patient's 55 or so or under and has a thin body habitus, I really like bone marrow. And if they're more senior and they may have a lot of adipose, we consider fat. And we don't add anything to the fat. We spin it down, concentrate it, and inject it into that area. And those are the 3 main treatments. And then also sometimes how we deliver the cells can vary. So if a patient in my practice has severe arthritis, and let's say they're under 65, and they want to avoid a joint replacement, because I'm in LA and my patients really want to avoid downtime. They don't want metal. They want to avoid surgery. Up to 30% of patients are not happy with a knee replacement. They want their old knee back. And sometimes we can't predict, even in the best of hands, there can be complications. You get an x-ray, it looks great. But why does it click? How come I can't go back to my activity? And once it's done, it's done. The revision rates are very poor on a knee replacement. So it's not like you can just easily swap it back out. It's fairly complicated. And then lastly, patients under 65 have poor results with knee replacements. So they're typically not, in my opinion, geared towards your community in terms of very active patients that need activity and exercise. And it's like getting one tire on your car. So if you get a knee replacement and you're 45, you need that tire to last for another 40 plus years. And so we're in this gap and we want to figure out what can we provide to them. So when the arthritis is really severe, my colleagues in Spain and France pioneered a treatment. In addition to injecting, say, bone marrow or PRP into a joint, we take a small little needle and inject it inside the bone. And so we find that the bone is a sponge and a beautiful scaffold to catch these cells. And the subchondral bone, or bone beneath the cartilage, is a very active metabolic region where there's a lot of communication and dysfunction occurring. And we had even talked about in the past, Wade, that as we look at the microgut and microbiome, there's abnormal gram-negative bacteria in arthritic joints at the ends of the joints. So we know there's a communication from our gut and biome in the cartilage. So in this bone, it has a direct highway to the cartilage, and we're finding trends of abnormal bacteria in the gut.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And one more item, but we're going to try to switch gears out of that. I noticed that there's a trend right now with facilities offering, when your child is born, to store the umbilical cord under, like, conditions so that you might be able to harvest stem cells for your child later on in life. What do you think of the validity of that practice, and does it have merit?
It's a great point. And then the real question is, what do you do? In terms of myself, I have 2 children. We harvested and stored their umbilical cord cells, not so much for current application, but the thought is that in the future, this may be valuable. And so I'd caution each individual to determine a cost benefit, because I've been doing this. My kids are about 11 and 13 now, and we're paying every year these renewal fees. And each year you kind of question it. But my heart and my passion is in cell-based therapies. And so I don't know that we're there yet in terms of understanding how to utilize these cells. but I'm convinced there will be a future application or need for them. And so we do bank those cells at the time of the childbirth and continue to renew it, more so for future thinking and more for more severe issues if needed down the road. That's available, but it's really unproven at this point because there aren't great peer-reviewed publications showing hundreds or thousands of patients that receive these cord blood samples for any disease state. So it's an individual decision, knowing that you're probably banking, so to speak, on future application.
Excellent. I think that's great insight. So thank you for a thorough explanation of the regenerative component of probably one of the most hot topics, the idea of quote unquote stem cells, although as you said, that's not an accurate representation, and the variants, I know our listeners are going to love that. But let's talk about maybe some other regenerative techniques that you've maybe experimented with and are using and have found good outcomes for. I think that would be of interest because oftentimes I've been around some extraordinary regenerative technologies and some very poor regenerative technology. It's a bit of a laundry list, and if you go to any of the health shows, you're going to see a cornucopia of things, and you can be shocked and zapped and lasered and vibrated and sounded, and it's really a circus out there.
Yeah.
How do you sort through the circus and get to something that's valid, that you can feel offers us a positive outcomes that you've noticed?
Yeah, it's a great point. And that's what I feel I'm, naturally good at in terms of identifying new technology and vetting the science on it. And it's, sometimes, as we work in the past with Navy SEALs or professional athletes, you have to work at fast, and you may not have years worth of peer-reviewed papers to make decisions on what are we going to use in this individual, this athlete, this situation right now. What's our best evidence, and let's move forward. And so being able to sift through that and see what has potential. For example, PRP. At the time I learned about it, there was one doctor in Stanford injecting tennis elbow, and that was it, not into joints. And so looking at the science and postulating, well, if this is working on tendons, I think it could work in joints, and let's start studying it and seeing it. And so the nice thing was, one of the benefits that came out of the pandemic for me was for 6 weeks, I was shut down. So in LA, we could not see patients. And I went from being super busy with all these projects and hosting my annual Toby conference to nothing, just growing a beard and getting depressed. And I got into this technology called shockwave therapy. And so shockwave therapy uses machine-based energy to stimulate tissue. And it was developed in the 1970s in Munich, Germany, to break up kidney stones. It was discovered in World War II. So there were castaways, American castaways were floating in the water, and bombs remotely were falling into the water. And these sound waves were traveling miles and creating cracks in the lungs of the castaways. So shock waves were identified during World War II. In the 70s, the Germans looked at that information and used that energy in these large, like freezer refrigerator-like devices to break up kidney stones, which was successful as a non-surgical alternative that was safe. Then shortly after, it was used for bone healing. So they accidentally found, when they were shockwaving kidney stones, that some of the pelvis was regenerating and bones were strengthening, getting stronger. So it led to research in orthopedics for fractures that weren't healing. Over time, it was popular in genitourinary, used for erectile dysfunction to improve blood flow, pelvic dysfunction for tightening, prostate, and now cardiovascular research. And so in the orthopedic space, it was shown to help with injuries of soft tissue like the plantar fascia, like heel pain, the Achilles tendon, patellar tendon, jumper's knee, or tennis elbow. And so over the pandemic, I just got immersed in all the research and literature. And with technology nowadays, you can read an article and email the author. And the
Right.
author's in Hamburg, Germany. Hi, doctor. I'm really interested. And so I started Zooming with all these European doctors. And all of a sudden I was like, this is just like PRP 16 years ago for me, where I found something that there's good science and it's about replicating the wound healing process. So let's say, Wade, I slipped and fell and I banged my elbow and I cut it open. So my body is already starting the wound healing process. So blood in these MSCs and platelets are going to the area of injury. They're causing redness, warmth, swelling, and then eventually that will change colors and bruising. The wound will scar, scab, and then release. And so when we're injecting cells, whether it's PRP or we're using machines like Shockwave, we're replicating the body's wound healing process. And so the power of this energy in a small handheld device is triggering the body's response to an injury and replicating loading. It's called mechanotransduction, which simulates exercise and loading. So as an alternative to me running 5 miles to strengthen my tibia, my bones, I can receive shockwave therapy that tricks or hacks the body into thinking it's loading, releasing all these pro-bone regenerative cells. And so I got really into Shockwave. I had had a machine previously, but I never harnessed its potential. Or I'd be afraid to use it on a pro athlete or a senior. And so through my conversations with European colleagues, I began to start stretching the boundaries of, well, can I use this in a pro athlete? And so what we're doing now is we're treating everyday weekend warrior patients that are probably a lot of people in this audience. I call them vision action personality types. They need motion, movement, activity. You take it away, they get very irritable and they don't want downtime from their injuries. So Shockwave is nice because it's minimally invasive, it's safe. Aside from a pacemaker, there's very few contraindications to it and no significant downtime. And so it's a way to treat a patient with a minor injury and they don't have to take too much time off of what they're doing. And now what we're doing is we're using it in pro athletes in season, even in locker rooms. And so what we're seeing is it can potentially help prevent injury. Because I tell my patients, almost 9 out of 10 injuries, Wade, that I see in my practice every day I'm in clinic are overuse injuries. I tell my patient, it's like taking a glass of water and putting a drop in it. And drop, drop, drop. Due to your biomechanics, whether it's your posturing, flat feet, you're not having enough recovery in between your sport or exercise. And one day you do something a little bit more, or what you've done all the time, and boom, you get injured. So if we can do something like Shockwave in between, say once a week or every few weeks, it helps the body and the tissues recover. So we don't build up this called tissue ischemia, which is poor blood flow. We get what's called myofascial pain, tender points. If we can knock those out before they pile up, we can potentially prevent injury. So now I'm consulting with top professional sports clubs, and we're using this on athletes in season to see the effects, for injury prevention, recovery, and healing.
Well, that'll be really exciting because I'm from Canada, for example, and defensemen almost always end up with an adductor injury because of they have to turn a certain way in order to catch forwards. And at a certain point in the defenseman's career, they're going to need surgery because they just do that over and over and over. And every sport has these repetitive based traumas that cut the career of the athlete short. And we're talking millions of dollars of lost revenue, not to mention quality of life, challenges that emerge from these surgeries that very seldom the athletes ever return back to their top form. And oftentimes those conditions lead to an early exit from their career. So that could be really profound.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip, how to get away with eating sugar. Hey, look, sugar is normally one of the worst things for you. But let's be honest. I mean, we all cheat from time to time. And here's a little trick that will ensure your body benefits from the sugar. Now, before you eat or drink anything sweet, take 5 to 8 capsules of P3OM. The patented strain in the formula devours sugar so fast it literally doubles in the body every 20 minutes in the presence of sugar. That doesn't mean that you can or you should eat a bunch of sugar or sit around all day doing that. But on the days that you do cheat, or you go after one of those maybe meals that you wouldn't normally do, this ensures that you get something in your gut that eats the sugar. And it's not going to feed the bad guys or spike your blood glucose nearly as much. So to learn more about P3OM and its sugar-devouring and protein-digesting properties and how it can transform your gut and metabolism, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Yeah, Shockwave is a great ace in the hole treatment when you have cases like that, where patient may not want an injection there or may not have the downtime. They could be in season, they could be starting their playoffs, or if it's a weekend warrior, this is their season and they don't want to push it off. But you're doing something to stimulate a healthy environment and encourage recovery and blood flow into those areas. And so it can be really beneficial in the right cases. And most patients are really receptive to trying. What's cool about Shockwave, there's 2 different types of Shockwave. And so most people I meet are like, oh, I've had Shockwave. So most likely you may have had it from a physical therapist. And so there's a Shockwave device called Radial, which is like a light bulb emitting energy. And so the energy is mostly at the skin surface, superficial. So it's good for soft tissue injuries and strains. But there's another energy called focal, which is a much more powerful beam of energy that can go 12 to 15 centimeters. It can help with bone bruising, bone healing, has more evidence. And with focused Shockwave, you move the probe around and it can diagnose the injury. You feel nothing, and boom, it finds like a hot spot and it reproduces the patient's pain. So most of my patients like it, and that it's uncomfortable to like a 3-4 on the pain scale out of 10. But you're finding their injury and they see that it's working. And patients typically will do treatments once a week for 3 to 5 sessions. If they haven't had clinically improvement after 3 sessions, we change course. But most people will have improvement. There's studies on single session causing at least 82% reduction in pain for jumper's knee. Military cadets with shin splints were able to get back in faster times compared to controls. So there is emerging evidence on this, and it's a great tool because it's really benign and safe.
That's really cool. So it has like a locking beam, like a missile guidance system, I guess. I did, is that how it works? Is it picks up?
Yeah, it's really cool. Like we had a professional baseball pitcher recently, and it helps find areas that the trainers can then know, oh, we've got some hot spots here we need to work on, or the athlete has feedback like, oh yeah, I didn't realize that area is also causing my pain. So it can even pick up stress fractures by lighting up on certain bones. So it's somewhat of a valuable diagnostic tool to the clinician as well, and the patient, because you're learning about your pain and kind of peeling it away, so to speak.
That's really exciting. Years ago, I got exposed to microcurrent technology, which used missile guidance technology that would find blockages inside your cell, and then you'd recalibrate. And I myself personally had positive components. I think a lot of people don't understand that usually injuries lead to a blockage of the flow of energy, nutrients, electricity, etc. And if you can reactivate that, then the function tends to regain. Would that be a reasonable layman's term summation of what you're trying to achieve in regenerative technology?
There's 2 ways to break that down. One is there's a doctor who passed called Janet Travell. She was John F. Kennedy's physician, and she diagnosed and coined the term trigger points. So we get soft tissue muscle pain, like pain in our back, the front of our shoulder, our traps, our neck, in between our shoulder blades. Those are more soft tissue pain. And there's a cascade or a series of natural events that occur from fatigue and overuse and lack of recovery. And without getting too scientific, there's a release of calcium through the soft tissue, the muscle, and the fascia. The fascia is all this connective tissue, which we're learning plays a really key role in inflammation and injury prevention. And if the patient is fatigued and doesn't recover, this calcium buildup leads to a lack of blood flow called ischemia, which leads to inflammation, pain, and these trigger points. So the theory through some of these machine-based vibrational therapies, you see like all the sports clubs have Theraguns and various products, is that you're trying to help the body recover so that the fascia, the tissue, doesn't get overwhelmed. The second thing is when you look inside a joint, like a knee joint, there's a yin-yang balance of cells and proteins between breakdown and repair. Every second we sit here, Wade, 15 million blood cells in our body die and are being regenerated. So our bodies are just made of trillions of cells, this highway that's communicating and trying to turn over cells. And sometimes we have an injury and our knee gets stuck. And so that fluid becomes imbalanced and has more inflammation. And the body has the ability to self-heal. And so it's trying to heal. And what does it do? It starts to work and eventually it goes haywire and it creates more fluid that we call bursitis. And so this fluid has an inflammatory component. If you looked at it under a microscopic lens, you'd see these cells have certain markers and names, and that's leading to the breakdown process. Our body also tries to create more bones and strengthen the bone, and we end up with bone spurs, which is a failed healing response, or calcification in our tendons. So you have the soft tissue level, and then you have the joint and the bone level. But Shockwave, I believe, can address both of those in terms of the cellular metabolic environment.
Wow, that's super cool. So if someone is suffering from some sort of debilitative condition, the weekend warrior effect, the tennis elbow, the bum knee from running too much or training much, whatever, what would you say the course of action that they need to take if they decided, hey, you know what? I want to go try some of this regenerative medicine technology. Who do they go for? What do they look for? What are maybe the telltale signs that you have a qualified practitioner? What are the telltale signs that you have an unqualified practitioner, so that you can determine and, effectively have confidence and say, yes, this is a right practitioner. I'd like to try this treatment, go forward with that treatment and hopefully produce a positive outcome.
It's a great point, and there needs to be more resources for the community and patients to find that reputable doctor. But some helpful tips I'd say would be the following. One is look for red flags. Look who not to see. So if the website references stem cell therapy and creates any false claims, stem cells will get you back to new, regenerate your cartilage with stem cell, or there's a slide I use from a clinic that was on Facebook offering a free lasagna if you come to a seminar to learn about stem cell. Red flag, we didn't go to medical school and do everything we're doing here and feel like we need to side hustle and offer like a rotisserie chicken or a lasagna to, exploit some vulnerable patient, with a meal. Oh, and we're going to talk about your health. So I'd say red flags are websites that have false claims, offering you anything in terms of like a meal, claiming they're like a foremost expert and they don't have any publications, articles, speaking things on their website. Many sites will say we're the best or the expert. Really look them up. That ideally, if they're claiming that, they should have some published literature on the matter. If you see that doctor, question like, how often do you do this, and gain their confidence in it. And so these cell therapies really need to be a full-time job, and you don't want to see a doctor that does them on the side. Like I've had colleagues, like I have a good friend in Chicago, and he went and saw a doctor, and the doctor was like, we could do PRP, it might help, it might not, I don't really do it that often, but yeah, we'll shoot you up. Not a very convincing consultation in terms of, look, we've done thousands of these. It may not work for you and you need to know that, but in my experience of doing X amount, we think this is right. Getting that meeting of the minds and feeling confident, making sure that doctor's spending a lot of quality time with you and not just 5 minutes, making sure the doctor uses image guidance. That's a great way for patients to weed out some of the bad players in the field. So if the doctor's not using an X-ray or an ultrasound machine to guide the injection, not where you need to go, because studies show up to 40% of the time, despite how experienced the orthopedist may be, the needle's not in the right place. It's not in the knee joint. And so you want to have those layers there. There are clinics like mine that collect data and research and even count the cells, so we know what goes into the process. But just by looking at the clinic's website, making sure there's no false claims, but there's really good information there, that doctor seems like they do a lot of this, versus like if you go to the website, 95% is all surgical and there's one little page on PRP. I wouldn't recommend it, because chances are that's not their wheelhouse. What we found over the years were doctors, first, when you come up with something new in medicine, first they ignore you, then they criticize you, and then they imitate you.
Mhm.
And so PRP is everywhere. Every orthopedic clinic is now offering it, but there's a great variability in the quality of it. And so it's really important for patients to look at those websites, make sure there's no false claims, no reference of the term stem cell ideally, and then gauge how often this doctor does it. And then when they meet with them, make sure there's a meeting of the minds. There's no guarantees of this, that it's going to work, and false claims with it.
That's a great list. So shockwave therapy, this is exciting. A couple other questions that kind of emerge. And what do you feel is emerging on the horizon of regenerative medicine, this field? What do you think is offering promising results, or areas to maybe avoid?
Yeah, I'd say a couple of things in terms of what's on the horizon is definitely going to be this concept of machine-based energy. And so using technology, Shockwave's just the beginning. And now we're having better capabilities of tracking outcomes and data to learn what's working, what's not. As you mentioned, all these circus of products, now we have registry data we can track and really see what's working. The wearable information is going to be game-changing. Whether it's a ring, a bracelet, a knee sleeve, that gives you real-time feedback in terms of inflammation, function, will help us. We're using something now called EMTT, which is an alternative to shockwave. It uses electromagnetic energy from the field. I don't know if you've heard of, Wade, something called PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic frequency.
Yep.
And so there's been research on that in NASA and space, and showing it can strengthen bones. So EMTT is about 40% more powerful than typical PEMF in a way that the patient really doesn't feel anything. So some people don't like the sensation of vibration and intensity.
Mm-hmm.
And so EMTT is passive and anti-inflammatory, and it helps. It's called cell wall permeability, which is these cells communicate and crosstalk to get the repair job done. So I think we're going to see more machine-based energy and more wearables, which will have a greater application. And then in terms of cell therapies and products, for better or worse, the way the industry is shifting is that there are major pharmaceutical industry players that are working with the FDA and doing appropriate trials and studies with birthing tissue products. And the potential benefit with that is that you're getting a standardized dose. Every vial has X amount of growth factor or cells or proteins. And you also know it's from a reputable provider, unlike what we talked about with exosomes and some of these umbilical cord products. So there are a few right now in the marketplace that are not in the marketplace, but are working through clinical trials, and maybe 2-3 years, those will be available. And I predict eventually covered by insurance. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be better than PRP, but I think it's going to be more readily available. Because when I look at the doctors at our conferences in the community, they love regenerative medicine. They love the idea of avoiding steroids and natural healing, but they have insurance-based practices, and it's very challenging integrating something that's self-pay cash. Doctors are not business-minded.
Mm-hmm.
Medicine is very straight and narrow. We take our tests, we do our, med school, we get a residency, a fellowship, an internship, a job. It's a very straight path. So this is a challenge for doctors, how to integrate some of these non-traditional treatments. And so having something that's covered by insurance, because all the PRP, bone marrow, fat are not, it's self-pay. And so having these off-the-shelf birthing tissue products in a few years potentially will allow much more widespread access to patients to get these therapies.
Very exciting. I have a variety of PEMF devices currently, and I like them, and there's different types and different intensities. Wide variety. So the idea of EMMT as a 40% better, that's an exciting prospect as well, to go along with Shockwave and PRP and these other technologies. Very exciting. I think before we wrap up, can you talk about your Toby conference and where it's started, and you kind of give an inclination of why you started, but now it's really become a very expansive conference that is drawing people from around the world, and it's obviously there's going to be a lot of exciting developments coming out of that, as well as connections and stuff. So you want to maybe outline what the conference is and
sure.
so exciting.
Yeah, the Toby conference really was a labor of love that exceeded my expectations. It was formed on just a sincere desire to connect doctors. I was really passionate about the idea of PRP, and there was no forum or place to go. And it just grew and created this community. And if you've ever seen those bell curves of like early adapters, people that just kind of get it, and I'm sure in your realm of micro gut and wellness, you see that same bell curve. Yeah. And so early on, we attracted this core group, and they were from Mayo, Harvard, Stanford, Emory. Like, these aren't quack docs out there. They were all legit and really wanted to do this the right way. And we wanted to present data science and have a forum. And so Toby just kept growing and growing. It includes a cadaver workshop where, doctors have a chance to learn techniques on cadaver tissue. There's breakout workshops. Networking is really important. The energy when you're doing these treatments and you're on your own, and then you go to Vegas at the Win, and suddenly there's 100 to 1,000 doctors all talking about what we're doing. That's where we, really glue, and that's where a lot of the creative ideas come together. So the networking is really key. And, there's challenges along the way. COVID certainly threw a wrench in the typical, Toby conference scheduling, and we pivoted to virtual. And I went, because Toby is always one step above the traditional medical conference. I feel like I'm into experiential learning, and the doctors really need to be engaged and not like a boring medical conference. So our first virtual event, we figured out how to do it. It was an ESPN, like with a ticker tape, and we had a live studio and different guests. And so we're always trying to push the envelope. In our last Toby conference that was back to in-person, we had Family Feud and Shark Tank. And so you'd put these like world thought leaders on stage and had them play in like somewhat of a casual / uncomfortable Family Feud. And it was really fun and a great way to get audience engagement. And through smartphones, we were voting. And we did a Shark Tank for a $10,000 research grant. And, they'd be sweating up on stage. And it was really neat. So our next event is June 8th to 10th, 2023 at Wynn Las Vegas. And we're collaborating with other societies and events, realizing this field is growing so much, and we don't want to keep repeating the information throughout the calendar year. So by partnering with other medical groups, we have a more robust schedule, curriculum, and attendance.
Very exciting. And where can people find you, your clinic, more about all of the projects that you're involved in? You're a busy guy doing a lot of cool things on the cutting edge. Can you kind of share with us where we get access to all that?
Sure, yeah. You can find me, my medical clinic is orthohealing.com, orthohealing.com. That's my practice in Los Angeles. And then if any specific viewers have a clinic in a certain location, through my Toby conference and 16 years of this industry, I usually have contacts anywhere around the world where I know of a reputable doctor that I can say, oh, you're in Croatia, my colleague knows someone there, or whatever region. So that's where information's available. My conference, which is really geared toward physicians at this time, is Toby, Tobi, conference.com.
Dr. Steven Sampson, this has been informative. I thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to kind of, walk us through this, emerging field of regenerative medicine and helping us discern, fact from fiction and red flags from green ones. So hopefully we get the checkered flag for everyone and they get the outcomes that they desire. For our listeners, thank you for joining us today. I hope you found this informative, and go out, if you have someone, check out Dr. Sampson's work. I think you'll find it exciting and maybe the next step that you take on your journey to healing and recovery. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers for the Awesome Health Podcast. Take care and beware.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip, rapid cheat meal relief. Research shows that cheat meals can actually be an effective way to boost your metabolism. One key weight loss hormone, leptin, can be increased by up to 30% following a cheat meal. The challenge with the cheat meals is that all those extra calories and lower food quality can be hard to digest, which means you could be totally sidelined with a food coma after big cheat meals. The solution is to take strong digestive enzymes like Masenchymal, which will help rapidly digest and break down the extra food. 3 to 5 capsules before or right after your cheat meal can make a huge difference in how you feel following the cheat meal. If it's a cheat day with multiple large meals, you might want to go up to 10 capsules or higher to help you power through all that food. To save 10% on Masszymes, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and enter the code CHEAT10 at checkout.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.